discuss our minutes or review the minutes from the September 11th Community Engagement Committee meeting. Did everyone get a chance to see those and read over them? Did anyone have any corrections?
So motion to approve.
Guess I'll second. I guess it's you and me.
Yeah, so you'll second it. and we'll-
I second it. Yeah, and I guess, do you vote yes there,
Yes.
Mr. Atherton? All right, I vote yes as well. Okay. All right, and then I'm going to screen share the next. So just real quickly, as we look at today's agenda, we are going to basically, there was so much wonderful information that staff presented last time. I really have to give a shout out to everyone who contributed to that, Dr. Felder and Dr. Keeling and Ms. Stowe and Dr. Dawson. We really had a lot of presentations, Dr. Gammon. So we had so much that we almost couldn't even, speaking for myself, dig into all of it adequately. So we're really going to go back through some of that data and continue to discuss so that we can target where we feel we as a board need to be better tuned in to all the community engagement activity already going on in the district, as well as identify any gaps with different stakeholder groups or just gaps where we need to be more present or aware of conversation. So so this is really a lot of conversation and kind of workshopping today. The next item is we're going to look at the list of ideas brought forward by board members in September and discuss what we see as something short-term or particularly to do during maybe between now and when we move into Plan B, some things that maybe are great ideas for the fall that we need to hold off on to for next year, or just kind of group them. And one item that I want to highlight is that we're going to determine the board member sort of official office hour arrangement today, which is on there. So I'm going to screen share here. This is the right one. Okay, actually I want to use a different document. Let's see. Okay, I assume that's visible to everybody.
Yes.
All right, so this is our list from last month. So we just kind of go through one at a time. One was partnering with PTA organizations in our schools. And I want to mention that there's like a joint PTA group of sorts. I know Emily Elstad meets with multiple PTAs. There's like a monthly PTA meeting of some sort. Does anyone know more about that?
No, I don't.
There's some, and I can find out about that, but there's some collaboration between schools, between elementary schools, where they're having some joint meetings or joint instruction, I think. So how do you feel about us as a board looking for opportunities to partner with PTA?
I think it's a great idea. I know this is one of the ones that I had mentioned when we were going through the list. I know years ago, when my older kids were in elementary, the board members would go to PTA meetings. Like when I went in a PTA meeting, there was a board member in that meeting, not to, you know, to talk about anything specific, but for them to get a feeling what was going on in the school. And then if there were specific updates that the board felt they wanted to share with the PTA, they would obviously share very specific things. But it was a good way of hearing board reports that other board members could come in and say, yes, I'm learning about this great item, or here's some interesting things, and just sharing that information, getting more understanding of what's going on in the schools and the parent.
Mhm. Okay, so someone I think also had mentioned like signing up families. There's a bit of a beginning of the school year aspect to some of the suggestion, but there's also just figuring out how we can more regularly be a part of PTA meetings. So, I mean, I guess one way we could do that is if there are 13 PTAs, we could email the principal and ask to be connected with the PTA president or secretary, and just try to figure out how to be present at those in a coordinated way. I mean, it's a little bit similar to what we want to do with the board office hours, is sort of distribute them. Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to mute myself when I'm typing, but I haven't figured out where that button is, so I apologize. Okay, so that's an action item, I guess, going forward. Hauser.
I just, you know, I think it's a great idea. One of the things that you meant, you know, Chapel Hill Schools has a PTA council.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's something, you know, that's what you said, Emily's kind of doing that kind of informally, but they have a PTA council. It is a very powerful organization. And it really brings power to the PTAs and to the parents and to the school. So I wonder if that's something to look at also.
Okay. Okay, so I can,
Ms. Doyle, I mean to
Yes.
interrupt, but if you want to mute, sharing your screen, if you move your mouse to this top center of your screen, a little bar will drop down with your controls.
oh, that's right. I think I discovered that last week and forgot. Thank you. Now I see where it is. Okay, great. Okay. All right. So then another one I'm gonna collaborate or join to here, and I talked a little bit about this with Ms. Stevens. So there's the idea of having like a literary night, which could be fun. I always think reading nights are a lot of fun. So that's with partnering with the public library. And then there's also somewhat of a similar idea about reading club throughout the district, culturally relevant book selection. So I want to go down to that one for just a minute. I was thinking about featuring authors, and someone already mentioned having culturally relevant book selections. We could also highlight different authors. And Ms. Stevens, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about Jackie Shelton Green? Not seeing Ms. Stevens right now. Maybe she's muted.
Do you want a little background on Jackie?
Yeah, sure.
Jackie Shelton Green is just stepped down as North Carolina Poet Laureate. She is from Efland, absolutely brilliant. And I know at the Efland Community Center, she did really interesting work with kids to get them to write their own story. And and she's always game for working with kids. So I'm not sure exactly, I'm not sure exactly what you're thinking about, because today I'm thinking, oh, that's more work for the school. What is the role of the board? What's the role of the schools? Right. They have their own, anyway, but Jackie is always, so I don't know what you were thinking about in terms of getting her involved, but she's very committed to this community.
Great. Okay. And Ms. Stevens is here too. I'm not able to see everyone as easily right now. Did you want to add to that, Ms. Stevens? Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. She's listening. She's not able to speak. She can't participate right now. Okay. So she had shared some similar things as what Ms. Hauser was sharing. And so I don't know exactly how this would work, but the thought was the the thought that I was having as I thought about this in advance of this meeting was almost having like a selection maybe by the board for the month or something, and we would just sort of feature it. Maybe we would do I don't know. This isn't my strong suit. Almost like a little, I don't know about video, but we could highlight the person or the book and why we're sort of advocating that families get to know this author. Maybe we could make some materials available with someone local like Ms. Shelton Green. Maybe she could make herself available if she were interested. Another author I wanted to highlight was Jacqueline Woodson, who was our National Poet Laureate for young people. And she just won a MacArthur Genius Grant, and she's got a bunch of awards. But she's written, there's a book that was really, that came out and got a lot of attention a few years ago, Brown Girl Dreaming. She writes stories in verse, sort of. So she's a poet, but it's also like fiction. So I'm sure there are a lot of authors that would be worth featuring and promoting reading. I thought if there's a way we could promote reading and connecting families with what we're reading. Does anyone else have thoughts about how this could potentially work?
It sounds like we could just have a board member volunteer and do a reading or a reading of a passage, and invite the public. It can be shared through the partnering of the PTAs, and maybe also think about the different levels of reading, right? Because you have the different age groups, and it could be something we could just show our focus on it. A lot of us get invited to go read in the classroom, but to this would be a much larger scale to me, district-wide versus just an individual school.
Ms. Doyle, have we talked to the public library about partnering with them? I thought I heard you say something about that, so sorry if I've missed something here, but I wonder if they could help facilitate, or I don't know.
Yes, I agree with you. Yes, and that was mentioned in one of the original ones, was to partner with the public library for a reading night. And then we just had a couple similar suggestions.
Okay.
So, yes, I think we should do that. That'd be a great way to help promote it and make it like a cohesive, carry a bit broader message, I think. And so one thing to think about is, when would we want to start? How frequently, what bandwidth do we have? How frequently could we pick a book or an author?
I think monthly would be reasonable. That way there's plenty of time to, put the logistics in place to do it. If a board member is going to read a passage, it could be pre-recorded, so there's several things we could do to help facilitate it, to make sure that, it could be successful. We're not going to run into time limits.
Yeah, and please just shout out if you want to say something.
Well, this is
Stevens.
Brenda Stevens. I want to say something. I don't know what happened. I had to get back on my cell phone, but I want to add a little more to what Bonnie had mentioned about Jackie, because she's so often overlooked. She has been committed to Eflin Cheeks Elementary School, and she has been there quite a bit. So I love the idea of including her, and I'm gonna get a shout out. You all go to our state magazine. Jackie is in there in her poetry room, because she does a lot of poetry. So I love the idea, and I love being a part of literacy in our community.
So do we see this like a book club, or do we see this like featuring a book? Like, I guess I'm just not clear on what I mean, I could support it either way. I'm just trying to understand what this is going to look like.
Yeah.
I think we're leaning towards featuring a book. I mean, in a way, it's a book club because we're almost indicating that we're all going to likely read it, or some of us are going to read it each time. So there's going to be, but I don't know that we'll have a monthly meeting to discuss the book. I don't know. What do people think about that?
I was just wanted to say, it's, again, there's a question about, as board members, what's our role in this? Because our teachers are doing this every day, but Tom Stevens, I don't know if you remember when Tom Stevens was mayor of Hillsborough, he used to periodically read a kid's book at the library. And he was really good at it. And his single goal and to get them to share his excitement around a book. And so that's kind of a cool thing. He did a good turnout for it. He's the mayor. But that kind of thing is, here's what I'd be a little bit hesitant for the board to all of a sudden be suggesting books above and beyond what the schools are suggesting, because they do that a lot. So we just have to be careful. I want to go back to the Jackie thing. Jackie did this really interesting. I'm looking at my social emotional learning screen. Jackie did this. I have it. I can share it with the board somehow, maybe circulate it. But she actually had the kids, and this is a community center. It's not the school. She had the kids. She worked in our summer enrichment program, and she had the kids write their own story and be proud of it. And then she published it in a book. So these. But was a really exciting step around literacy that she took with the kids. I just want to say too that, it's like, let's be careful about making activities that the schools do all the time. But if we're going to do something, let's make it really exciting, not scheduled, but really exciting.
I mean, in my opinion, there can't be too many books promoted. So I agree. I wouldn't want to step on the school's toes in terms of like expecting them to carry something, expecting them to implement something we suggest. But I think if it's almost secondary, but just another avenue where kids are seeing a book talked about and having the opportunity to join in, I think the more the merrier. As long as we can keep up our end. So maybe we need some follow-up with the public library. And maybe Ms. Green would be a good one to talk to. And maybe we can also start compiling some ideas of authors or books we'd like to feature. There is also, we could reach out. There's the Mayor's Leadership Club, which both Mayor Stevens and Mayor Jen Weaver are a part of. Be something we could see if they want to join in sometime or get ideas from them. Other thoughts about this or other action items people think we should take to pursue this?
Libby Huff at the library might be a good connection since she's a previous board member. She would understand kind of how to connect the dots maybe.
And because she is the community person at the library, it is her job.
Right. So maybe a conversation with her is the next step of, how she could see us partnering. I mean, maybe it's that we record a reading for a book club they're already doing, or they start, some other featured thing where board members could record something to put on their website and ours. I think the partnership could be pretty cool. So I don't know, she might be a good connection.
Okay, that's a great idea.
Yep.
Okay, so
Would you like me to reach out to Jackie and see if what her interest is? Do you want me to reach out to her? I'm happy to.
yeah, I think if she's someone you talk to and you want to just see what ideas she has about it, I think that'd be great.
So I would just say,
Okay,
like, Bonnie,
okay.
if you're going to reach out to her, if we haven't figured out all the parameters for this,
Right.
just making sure that you say that so she doesn't have any particular expectation in mind of what it's going to look like.
I find out what her, if she's interested and what she might be interested in. So I just do an inquiry to her and say, what are you thinking? And or would you be interested in helping? I understand the goal is to advance literacy with our kids and possibly do something periodically. But I just want to ask her what, she might say. She's so busy. I mean, she's traveling. I think she's in Morocco now. I mean, she's traveling around the world. So
is it literacy for our kids or literacy in the community? Because we're not doing kids books, are we? Or are we? I don't know. I mean, I'm fine with whatever. I just feel like if we're reaching out to someone who's a very busy, important person in our community, I'd hate to waste their time asking for their opinions and then decide we're doing something else. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
But
that's a good point. That's a good point. Which we could, I think we're doing literacy for our kids, but I think some of these books and authors will draw on families too. But I think we're talking about kids and young adult books. Maybe it would make sense if we start at the library with, is it Huff? Is it Libby Huff? Is that how you pronounce it?
Tough.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay. Ms. Stevens, would you like to reach out to Ms. Huff?
I'll absolutely do that because we have an
Okay.
event on Sunday. So
Excellent.
we will talk.
Excellent, thank you. Okay. Some of the other ideas, jumping up over that little paragraph, is a family fitness night. I mean, some of these ideas are great. I think we just need to decide which ones we want to do first. It sounds like we want to get the idea of a district book or board recommended book going, and that we want to find out about the PTA connection soon. What about something like a family fitness night or sort of similarly a mental health night?
I think both are great ideas, especially now, since we're so remote and not as active and people forget about mental health as well.
So do you see it like as
I'm
soon
just-
as soon as we have the bandwidth to like add something else? I mean, do you think we should do one ahead of the other or wait till we have the book thing underway? Mr. Atherton or?
Yeah, if I had to give a priority, I would say the mental health is probably in higher need across the board. I mean, but that's my opinion. I don't know how others feel, but the other thing, like you mentioned, if we go after all of these, we'll probably not do any of them well.
Maybe we can do the family fitness type event in the spring. But I agree with you that mental health, and I have an item related to that a little bit farther down. I think mental health is crucial right now. So other thoughts?
I was going to say, what is the role? These things are happening in community and in different places in different ways in community. And what is our silo around this, or are we going to try to connect into things that are already happening in the community? Because if a school board member shows up, it raises the stature of anything that's happening in the community. Just a little creating our own stuff and just saying other things everybody's plate. So I'm just really worried about that.
Well, go ahead, Mr. Atherton.
I was just going to say that, if there's already existing items, I think it makes a lot of sense to leverage those. But, in the sense of equity, there may be areas that aren't covered but I think as a starting point, leveraging something that exists makes a lot of sense. So we don't reinvent the wheel or inadvertently maybe, not acknowledge these good avenues that are already there. So I think if we can find these avenues, that would be great.
Okay, and we'll be sort of revisiting when we look at the asset map again, what's already happening. There might be something we think is already happening. Like, for example, the mental health night. I'm still learning about this, but I am serving on now the Student Health Advisory Council, and I asked if there was a mental health committee, and so I think we're going to have one. I'd really like there to be one. And so, maybe this would connect with School Health Advisory Council. Ms. McKenzie, do you know if it would work that way? School Health Advisory Council?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question, Carrie? I apologize.
Well, I'm just thinking about the mental health piece.
Yeah.
And that's something I brought up. I asked Dr. Lewis about with School Health Advisory Council. So in terms of Ms. Hauser's point of not like creating new structures all the time, it seems like the issue of mental health and how we could partner around that issue would be something that might come up with the School Health Advisory Council.
Absolutely. I think Mr. Lewis would have a lot of ideas about what's already going on. And I think to everyone's point about elevating activities that are already happening is a great idea, and maybe us participating. I do worry that if we have 5 events a month, it's going to be might be a little much. So I think, talking to folks and researching what's already out there is a great idea first. And I think Mr. Lewis would be a very smart first contact.
Okay. We also have the idea of lunch with parents, which is a little bit different from PTA, but I think maybe we should, given all the tension around lunch these days, maybe we can delay that till spring or see when we have a little bit more organized contact with PTAs. That seems like a little bit more of a long term at this point, if people are okay with that.
Hi, Mrs. Dole. I understand that there is a board member serving on a committee around mental health with Ms. Cobb. And so maybe Ms. Cobb can share a little bit more about that.
Yes, good morning. We, in the past, have had a board member that served on the Mental Health Community Connections Committee with me, and that committee works with Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools and Orange County Schools and the community to develop programs and activities to support students and mental health. We actually have a teen summit, a mental health teen summit coming up on October 15th. We've sent a reminder about that is coming up, and in that it is called Ending the Silence. It's Students United for Mental Health Awareness, and we have student leaders as well as school leaders that will be attending, and then students that will go back and have committees at their schools around putting supports in place for mental health in their school buildings. And we have solicited grants through different community organizations, one of them being our school-based mental health partner that will use that funding to support each of the committees at each of our schools. So there's a committee from each of our high schools that will be attending and then going back, setting up those committees in their schools to do and put things in place to support students in mental health.
So, Ms. Cobb, thank you for sharing. Just for clarity, did you say that there's currently a board member participating, or one has in the past and having another board member would be welcomed? Please clarify. Thanks.
Yes, there was one that served in the past, and last year we had a lot of changes happening at the time when that person would have been selected. So that did not happen. And then we went into COVID-19. So we are getting ready now. We're preparing for a board member to serve on that committee. One serves from Chapel Hill Carver City Schools and one serves from Orange County. And we have a committee that is with the board members, myself, and other district level employees. And then there is a subcommittee which is made up of counselors, social workers from both the school districts that look at what are the needs of our students and what are the needs of our district.
That is so exciting. Thank you for telling us about that. The Ending the Silence event, what is that, like a virtual webinar that is open to the public, or is it more of a private event? Or
it is a teen summit that we have been working on since last year, and it is, what happened is a select group of students were chosen by the school leaders to serve on that committee because we couldn't support having, even when we were planning to do it face to face, we couldn't support just an open type of program at that time because of spacing. So we wanted to have committees that would go back and then form clubs and or committees in their schools to provide support for students or for kids that just wanted to support others who were dealing with mental health. And so we have from that, school leaders chose an adult in the building or adults in the building to support that program. And then children were chosen to attend that meeting. And since we've had to go virtual, we have those committees set up and it'll be a virtual meeting on October 15th.
okay, that sounds really great and comprehensive. Is there, at what level would it be feasible for the board to have a little bit of information about that? That doesn't complicate things or invade anybody's sense of privacy.
So I have shared with Dr. Felder the brochure as well as the information of who those speakers would be. And so that will come out, I believe, in the board update.
Yeah. I can send it sooner if you'd like. That's not a problem.
So I'll just send an email out asking if there's a board member who's interested in participating after reading through the board update tonight or tomorrow. And then we'll just figure out who would like to do it. Does that sound like a plan to everybody?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Cobb.
Yeah. Hillary, I think that would be great. I wonder if it's possible for you to send out a list of all the places where board members could participate. So rather than do each one separately, to look at them all to make sure that there's representative participation across the board. But is there a way to put together an entire list of places where the board can engage, board members can engage on our behalf?
So I think that's what we're kind of doing now. And I agree with that. I was unaware that this committee existed or that a board member usually was a representative. But I think considering there's a summit in 6 days, we probably just need to move forward quickly on this. And then I will, to your point, I will try to follow up with Dr. Felder and get a more comprehensive list, and then we can kind of go through it that way. Does that sound okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Okay, one item that I wanted to highlight and make sure we had some agreement around, I've had some conversation with Ms. McKenzie about this offline, but the idea of having the structured office hours, she suggested maybe twice a month, and I was thinking possibly like Monday evening. On Mondays, we don't have a board meeting, so one Monday a month, and possibly, if people are willing, a Saturday morning. And as long as we had at least one board member sign up for each slot, but up to 3 board members, then it would just be sort of like standing board office hours, and we would just kind of bill it as such. And then, you know, whoever signed up for those slots. How do people feel about that breakdown of about twice a month, like one evening, such as a Monday evening, and a morning, possibly a Saturday morning?
Yeah, I think it makes sense making us available in any avenue we can. And like you said, I know there's people that work at nights that will not be able to make Monday. So I think, the Saturday option is a good option to make sure we're having multiple ways that people could, contact us or give us feedback. Um, the one thing we probably need to make sure of is which, depending on how we do this, which board member will moderate, because we're going to have, Zoom bombs or whatever, because it will be public, all the information will be available. So somebody has to just watch who's coming in and out and being prepared to eject people if something happens. So unfortunately.
I'd like to add a couple of thoughts. One is, if we announce, I think it should be that we need to deal with the moderation, but if we announce it, then, any board member or all the board can participate if we think it's a hot time in the community, but we control the community. I suggest that, as a board, we do need to start thinking about coming back to school, because we're asking our teachers to come back to school, and it might be a way for us to launch a return to school for the board, that distance way with maybe a Zoom access, but I wonder if it's a really nice way for us to return to school ourselves.
So I would just throw out there that I don't think that office hours are the way for us to launch something like that personally. I think we need to just, I hear you, Bonnie, and I'm happy to have that conversation, but I just don't know that it really, for me, should be I think office hours should just be office hours. I don't think that they should have an agenda to them necessarily, other than just hearing from folks. And I think that if we make them in person, it's going to limit the number of people that can go and the number of people who can participate personally right now, because we just can't have 50 people in a room, but we can have 50 people in Zoom. I also worry when I hear us start saying office hours, but 7 members of the board can participate. Our lawyers already said that it can be up to 3. And if we want to have a situation where we need a public, if we have a situation where we need a public hearing, or we need to have a full board meeting, then we need to call a public hearing. I just don't think that's office hours. And if we're gonna set up office hours, I wanna be really clear on what office hours are. And I wanna just set up in a way that it has a long-term objective, not a short-term objective like reopening schools or a public hearing. Because I just think those are those are lots of different things. And I think when you start trying to do, set up a system, but you're doing it with a particular objective, like moving back to school or something in mind, it muddies the vision for the bigger system we're setting up. But I hear you, and I think those things need to be addressed. So I'm not against what you're saying, that we need to address all of those things. Just think that they're separate issues.
So, okay, so
and the
how
other
about
thing
if
I'm
we,
saying as far as announcing it,
let's just set it up as remote, since we are remote right now, and get it rolling so we have some structure and predictability to it, and then decide when to switch to or add in or make one of them in person would be my leaning. Because I think at least at this point it makes sense to do it remotely. And I do have a question about Mr. Awesome, to your point about Zoom bombing. Is this something that we should do not with WebEx?
Well, no, it doesn't matter. So the difference, and to Hillary's point earlier, it's an unstructured meeting because you're wanting people to ask questions and hear them. And so doing that allows anybody in those cases to do video, audio, etc. So normally that's done in a Zoom manner, so you can remove people if you need to. But the concern is you can't control, once you allow somebody that access, you can't control what they're going to do and say. So unless we have a very painful setup of WebEx where we're panelists like now, and then you look at the participants and you wait to see them raise their hands and you pull that one person in and that one person out. And now you really need a third person that all they're doing is looking at it. But one of the advantages too, or at least what I learned from it was, you can say up front to people, hey, if you have a comment and you don't feel comfortable saying it, put it in the comments, and you just periodically look at the comments and say, hey, we have a question. Here's, this question. But I agree that given it's not structured, I would be very concerned with, trying to do a specific topic. That seems more of a structured meeting. But I do say to Bonnie's point, there will be people we cannot reach because they don't have internet, they don't have access, and I would like to leave that open for discussion just so we can get this started. But we know there's people that don't have internet, and they're not going to, or they don't have phones, that was some of the eye-opening that I've learned through the pandemic is these people have to want to communicate differently, but we should consider that at some point. I need to kick it off, to get it going.
A little run with that. What if we were up at the Cedar Grove Community Center or the F1 Community Center and the community was invited to come out and that will be there? I mean, it's like a rotating office hours that will be different. Or at one of the schools, so but it's different places. It's a way to really, I mean, honestly, I'd love to see the board meetings go like that, but those are people to go to them and go in a way they like to, they're comfortable communicating. It's something to really put let's make it a little challenging for us to get out to them. And I want Zoom bomb. Our meetings was bombed. The NAACP was bombed, and I don't know if this is typical. I know some of our classes have been bombed. If they typically come in the middle, because it's have an agenda. It is not our meeting. We are available for whoever shows up. But we could create a rule like where the doors are closed after the first minutes. So that kind of the Zoom bombers seem to come in later in meetings. So that would be a way for us to protect it, but we have to really keep it accessible.
Yeah, Bonnie, I would just say that Zoom bombing doesn't have a time limit. NAACP was at the beginning, sorta, and some of the meetings that I've been in where Zoom bombed were right at the beginning. So it depends on the topic and how heated the group is. So I agree that if you all of a sudden get 5 people at an hour into it, you should be suspicious that that's just too coordinated, that all of a sudden 5 people showed up in the middle. But I just want to highlight there's not an easy way to determine are they going to join at the beginning or end. It just depends on these people that do that.
Okay, let's keep going so we can try to get to all of these. Okay, so I have here review the comments from the teacher and staff surveys, which we've since gotten. So are people okay with us not doing that right now? I don't know if we want to have a time at another committee meeting where we spend some time reviewing teacher and staff surveys, or if we feel like we've done this in other forums. But I'm not prepared to pull them out right today during this meeting. Thoughts about that?
Yeah, I'm personally okay with that. This is a huge list to accomplish, and I think, you know, we've looked at a lot of these in our other meetings and had lots of discussions. I mean, this is us just going a level deeper in that.
Okay, so great. If we can keep going then. Conversations with community clubs.
Yeah, this was, you know, we've got Exchange Club, we've got Rulletons, we've got FFA, we've got all these clubs that indirectly support the schools, and seeing, you know, when we engage with them, are there things that they can help us with, or we can help them, or, you know, just strengthening that. Most of these clubs gives pretty substantial scholarships to our seniors, or, you know, provide food and other items to our district and or directly to families. So this was just, again, trying to an outreach in different areas of our community. You know, and a lot of these clubs, there's, you know, some of these groups have no kids in the system, right? So this thought was, hey, is there a way or something we could do to engage these groups in a different way to see, you know, what we can grow there, right? It's nothing particular in my mind, just was, is there something else? And see what's on their mind. You know, it may be just going to one of their meetings, or listening on, you know, what they would like to see more from our district, you know. Anyway, just random thoughts around that.
That's a good point, and that will come up again when we look at the asset map. I'm curious with some ones you mentioned, which ones are even mentioned in our asset map, and maybe be thinking about that, Mr. Atherton, if there's something to add in. Okay, what about pursuing this idea of, when we return to meetings, larger spaces?
Well, given social distancing, it's a must. I mean, we're not going to be able to social distance in the central office. I mean, there's just no way.
I think the wood building makes a lot of sense, but it costs a lot of money to use their recording equipment, so I'm a little concerned about that.
Whereas we've done some at Standback. Is there a reason we use Standback in particular, or?
I don't know.
No, my experience is it was dependent on what facilities available and how much air space is available. So you don't put a board meeting on top of, say, senior night, or, you know, some entry. Now, I know that our district does have the ability to remotely record. I don't know the details of it. So I wonder if that could be used at the WITA building and or at schools, but don't know. I don't know, Dr. Felder, if you have insight to that.
I don't, Mr. Atherton, but can certainly find out. Mhm.
Yeah, I'd like to just, I mean, Gravely and CW Stanford has that new auditorium that's beautiful. So, you know, you wonder why would we would try that. I do have a concern, you know, in a certain way, and I want to go back, just let's be really clear. And I won't go back into the central office room, you know, but I have a concern that the way we do the recording versus the way the county does their recordings, in the town, they're using the Granicus system. They have consultants there. It's about $1,000 a meeting, but they're very precise about seeing faces and what said. Watch a school board meeting on YouTube, I can't follow most of it. I don't know what's being presented. It's hard to follow what somebody's saying when you're looking at the back of their heads. So it creates an immediate barrier. So if we come back, I think we've got to come back in a way that it makes it easier for someone to look at the recordings? And is it worth $1,000 a meeting for us to do that better? And would the county be willing to help with the costs? It's worth asking, because I know they'd like to get more use out of the wooded building. But I think there's a question about, if we come back, are we going to make it, is it going to be harder for people to follow what's happening in the meeting? So I just would like us to be a little careful about that.
So I think that the conversation around board meetings in person, I guess I'm worried. I know that we have some board members that might qualify if they were employees for ADA exemptions, and I just wonder, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to say a lot more because we're in a public meeting right now. But this board has some decisions it needs to make before we talk about meeting publicly. And so I'll just leave it at that for now.
Okay, let's keep going a little bit. These are good ideas to keep in mind for when we do get to that point. I know that we talked about, we already have students, teachers, first on board agendas. Someone made a comment about when public, Ms. McKenzie, can you remind me exactly how public comment works? And is there anything to revisit about that, or is that just the way? Someone made the point last time about when public comment is allowed at the business meetings versus work sessions.
Oh, I don't know what does anybody, is whoever put that out there here? Because I'm not sure what I don't know what concern we'd be addressing. At work sessions, folks comment on agenda items rather than anything. That's the main difference. It's 3 minutes. We typically cap public comment at an hour at work sessions, but I don't know that I've ever actually seen that be an issue. So, and usually the board is pretty, if we had extra speakers, I think the board is usually willing to hear it. So I'm happy to answer more, but I don't really know what else I'm supposed to.
Okay, let's keep going so we can get to some other things.
Carrie, I just want to comment that we have had reaction because we say we can't respond to comments from people. And if an item is not on the agenda and it comes in through a public comment and it's not on the agenda, that makes perfect sense. The topic hasn't been announced. We can't talk about it if someone raises it. But if a topic is on the agenda and there's public comment on it, certainly we don't have to respond to individual comments, but in our deliberations, we should be considering what people are saying, or else in a way we're telling them, hey, you can say what you want, we're going to ignore you. That's what it sounds like. I don't think it's what we mean. But I think certainly we would consider public comment on an agenda item as we're discussing it.
Sure. There's no limitation in what you say as a board member during our deliberation.
Oh, I understand. It's just that I think there was some confusion because people have said, because I think that there's been times where you've told folks, we don't respond to individual comments when they were commenting on an agenda item. I just think it's there's a confusion about it. And so we just, that's all.
Well, it's laid out in policy, so maybe it makes sense to post that policy where people register to sign up. I mean, if someone gets on there and starts asking individual questions, that's just not the venue for that. And certainly I try to be as responsive as possible as the person who is responsible for, answering questions via email or phone. But during public comment, we just don't go back and forth with folks. So, I mean, I think that's how most government bodies work.
And that makes sense. That makes complete sense. And that makes complete sense. I don't think that it was heard that way, but that makes, yes, we don't respond to individuals, but we'll consider their questions or comments in our deliberations
Mhm.
if they're talking about a topic on the agenda. You don't have to say that. I think we just have to just let people talk.
Okay,
Right.
and let's keep
Right,
going a
that's
little bit though, because we've got one of the other items, I feel like this might have been yours, Ms. Hauser, the online letter archive. Do you want to say more about that?
Well, again, in the spirit of transparency, right? I think we're trying to create more engagement and more transparency. And by the way, I was at a dinner last night, and I got high compliments from the board that said that the feeling is the new board is much more open, and the teachers and parents feel much better about reaching out to us. So congratulations to all of us for that. But there's if you go online, the Orange County Commissioners, town councils, I don't know about Chapel Hill schools, but they all have all the emails that they get go online, and it's in a public archive. Anybody could see them. And it's very, you have the choice as a sender to send it to the public archive or to send it individually to board members. But if it goes to like our OCS board members email, it would go onto the archive. So that'd be the choice of the sender. But it immediately lets people know what people are saying, what we're hearing. And
Okay, why don't I ask, I can reach out over to Durham Public Schools and Chapel Hill Carver City Schools and ask how they are set up in that way, and then just get some information on that.
Okay.
So I worry about how much we're going to have to pay our lawyer to redact all the information from our emails. Our emails are public record, and there's nothing that I personally have any problem with anyone seeing, but I think we're talking about spending a lot of money paying someone to redact emails to put on an open server, which emails are like 99% of the time list a student or staff member. So I'm concerned, but whatever the pleasure of the board is.
I just have to ask, in all the emails I've seen, I haven't noticed that. I haven't seen them naming students or staff members.
Well, if it names the person who, is submitting the email, which it does on like the commissioner's email, and they're talking about their child's teacher, their child's experience. I mean, you can't post that. We have to follow FERPA.
So if it doesn't name, even though there's no name, there's not.
We have to follow federal regulations around protecting our students' privacy. So naming that they have a child in the district and what grade they're in, even, I don't know that we can post that publicly.
We should probably find that out. It'll be worth it to ask Eva what that limitation is.
Okay. So I feel like a lot of us have interest in, and this can come up again in the asset map. So I want to just mention this, but we might need to come back to this topic or have this as an action item going forward at the end. It ties into something at the end as well. But I know a lot of us feel that an area where we felt we were more accessible as the board or tuned in as the board is with our Latinx community, particularly because of potential language barriers. I know Mr. Atherton and Ms. Hauser met with that one group, and there's a question about translation. And personally, I really like the idea of having some sort of, even if it's twice a year, a spring and a fall, be neat if it was more. But I would love to have something where we have a gathering at a location selected by our Latinx community and had reverse translation, the English speakers. So I really am attached to this idea. I did join in on Ms. Blefko's parent night that she had. I don't remember which night that was. It was like Tuesday, I think, this week. And so there are some things going on right now with our family liaisons. But this would be a little bit more of a board. If we're talking about having regular board office hours, this is something to keep in mind. We probably wouldn't have translation. Maybe we should have monthly or seasonally, something targeting our non-English speaking families. What do y'all think about this?
I think we need to accommodate.
I think,
Would you see that? Oh, I'm sorry.
well, I was just gonna say, I think that if we're having meetings as like if we're doing this as a board, then we ought to have an interpreter for every meeting. I mean, I think it's different when it's individuals, but I think if the board is deciding that we're having scheduled office hours, that it makes a lot of sense to have an interpreter.
But are you saying, Ms. McKenzie, so the ones that we're talking about, which would have 1, 2, or 3 board members, are you including that as a board? Are you?
Yeah, because we're deciding as a board that we're having these standing office hours. Like it's the board represented, you know, it's members of the board representing the board to hear from the community. And so if we know that 25% of our students are not next, I feel like we'd be excluding certain families if we didn't have an interpreter.
Okay, so you think that we should plan on at the evening one, so that the twice monthly meeting should have an interpreter, and maybe we should start there and then look at that, something more, I don't know if there'd be something different, bigger, more fun. But that might be something we do in the spring, but for now you're saying that we should, as Mr. Atherton said, we should accommodate, that we should have translation services available at those twice monthly office hours. I just want to make sure I'm.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. I just want to make sure.
I just want to, you know, these things cost money too, and I always don't, I like equity trumps money for me all the time, but I think it would be the most equitable thing I think we can do is ask people what their interest is, and it might be a good idea to ask Ms. Blefko. It might be a good idea to reach into the Family Success Alliance. It might be a good idea to reach into our principals and say, would the parents like to have their own office hours? Do you think, would they be, because I can tell you, we've had office hours where 3 people show up. None of them Spanish speaking, and now all of a sudden you've got 3 board members and a translator, so we've got more people in the meeting than them. You know, so I just am a little worried that we're creating structures without understanding the interests, and I wonder if we could kind of learn a little bit more about what people want before we offer it. Just a thought.
Well, I mean, I know I went to, like I said, Ms. Blefko put out those meetings for families, getting to know the family liaisons, and there were people who showed up, and they did Karen translation on Tuesday. I mean, it seemed pretty vital to me. Some of them had questions about how Virtual Academy would work. I mean, I think we should assume there's going to be interest. I mean, I hear what you're saying.
Right. The question is, do we create an affinity group for them, or do we try to fit them into the broader structure? Or do we ask Ms. Blefko if she could do a group for the board and make that board meeting very specifically for that group? When Will and I did office hours, we went over to Holy Family and we did it in their church. We attended their church service and then we followed with our session. So it was really theirs, you know, it wasn't us. So there's a question about, you know, can we do that, right? Meet them where they are rather than invite them into this other place. Just,
Yeah. Yeah, and that was what seemed like something, that was something that appealed to me originally as well. But I think what we're starting with at this point is office hours. And so for now, we've, as we're trying to incorporate as many steps as we can, make sure that we're accessible to different speakers in these office hours, and then potentially have other events later, I'm guessing is something we could consider. What do you think about that, Mr. Atherton?
I agree. We've got to start somewhere. And I do understand what Bonnie's saying is that, you know, if we're not going to get a large audience, you know, I can tell you that if two people show up, they're going to be happy just to be able to speak their mind, right? And the intention is we're available to who wants it. But I agree with Bonnie. We will need, after we start, to figure out how we meet people where they are, because there are people that just don't have internet. They just don't communicate that way, and they don't want to communicate that way, and they feel intimidated, right? We talked about people that aren't comfortable speaking their truth in this kind of fashion. So I do think we'll have to look at alternate methods, but I think we start off with the virtual to give the opportunity to as many people as we can, and then figure out what that looks like when we move over, especially after we build our protocols, because we'll need to follow those protocols if we're going to meet in person, right, in some manner, especially if they're at one of our school sites.
Okay, and just at the end, I have, when we think about what staff we'd like to hear from for next month's meeting, Ms. Blefko is top of my list, partly because there's so much going on with family outreach. So maybe some of these broader questions we can discuss more fully with her next month. So just to let everybody know, so Ms. McKenzie and I started some outreach to the local Indigenous community this summer. And I just wanted to share that we're getting some feedback about potential training we could do as a board, like a proposal for training for basically better cultural awareness. One issue we've had is sort of a history of students with Indigenous heritage not identifying as such because of experiences with racism or like a lack of supporting environment in the past in our district. So this is something we've been trying to do really carefully and respectfully, get some more information about where we need to improve as a district. And so we're going to, in the next week or two, receive some information about potential training that we can do as a board. Ms. McKenzie, am I leaving anything out?
I don't think so. We just reached out to Vivette Jeffries, Logan, who some of you probably are familiar with. And we just had a conversation about, building a relationship between the Indigenous peoples of this area and the school district. But we're waiting to hear back from her with her proposal. So, we'll definitely keep everyone in the loop as we hear more, but yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, this is like a whole nother big topic. But Ms. Hauser, I think you were the one who mentioned that Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools has an advisory council. I am not an expert on this area. Who has some experience in this area to share about our EC families?
So I do know about their advisory council, and I do know that they have affinity groups that are on Facebook. They have monthly meetings. They have outings. It is a closed group. Closed group in the sense you have to request to get access to that. They do have things like book clubs. They have sensory uh, types of events. Even to date, they do have virtual visits to things like the zoo, and it's within that group. Um, uh, they give a lot of feedback on concerns, issues, and approaches. So I guess the question around this was, are we looking to have a similar group in Orange County? Um, it, to be an advisory council, obviously it either is done through the board or it's done externally. Externally normally is they've done it themselves because of issues, but um, I think it's a very powerful voice to be able to have that group. I can tell you that I had a lot of concerns when we talked about our equity task force and making sure the EC students were represented, and also our students in especially high school, making sure that they were reached out to and how do they get included and participate in a manner that they can, right? Whether that's in person, not in person, or any other options that are available.
Yeah. I just want, the Special Needs Advisory Council is really a composite of teachers, parents, administrators, and I think there's one or two board members, I'm not sure. And actually Amy Fowler, who is now the vice chair of the school board and about to become a county commissioner, was one of them. And I wonder, and as soon as it becomes a board thing, then all of a sudden we're in control and we've taken away the voice. But I wonder, and I know Jennifer Moore has an unbelievable resume around EC. So I just need to throw that out there. But I wonder if we could find a couple of parents who are really, and I know we're invited, our people are always invited to attend a snack meeting. So if we can get a couple of our folks to attend the chat that are interested in this, in creating, and it's really a support system for the parents and the teachers, right? That's what it becomes. But is it possible for us to ask some people to attend the Chapel Hill snack meeting and then figure out what they'd like to create for them, for us, and let it kind of take a form in that way?
Is it SNAC?
Yeah, Special Needs Advisory Council.
Carrie, I'd be willing to reach out and talk to Amy.
Mhm.
Know Amy. I'm already engaged in those communities already.
Mhm.
So I can reach out and bring back more information to the
That'd be great.
group.
Mhm. Okay, I put this one on here and it kind of also relates to what Mr. Atherton said, but I'm gonna delay this idea of, I feel like there's so much we're talking about right now, this idea of business partners, opportunities for students. It kind of ties into what was mentioned earlier. Also the food and nutrition program, talking about some activity going on in Durham Public Schools where there's like a network of volunteers and local farms. We have that a little bit with our the food coming out of Weaver Street and Porch. So does anyone have anything in the short term around this? Or is this seems really big at the moment to look at other ideas with what we do with food?
I would personally like to hear if Sharita's still on, her thoughts on this. I know she's been fabulous and fantastic around everything we've had to deal with during the COVID and making sure everybody's fed and you know, her thoughts and ideas about where we could improve this, or just thoughts that go on.
Ms. Cobb, are you on?
Yes, ma'am, I am. So we are still looking at and looking for opportunities to work with local farmers and different organizations. We have been in contact with Weaver Street, and I believe that the Roundup program has started again. So we are still working with them. We are still working with Porch. We just began working, and I apologize, the name of the organization slips my mind. It is a local farming group out of Greensboro. And so every Tuesday for the last 2 weeks and for the next 3 weeks, we will be giving out food, and we have been announcing that. My social workers and I are out there every Tuesday putting boxes of food in cars. And this past Tuesday, we gave out 600 boxes of food. And we will continue to do that work, and we will continue to look for ways to partner with organizations in our community. And I do believe that this Tuesday past, we had received more cards from Porch, and so we gave out some gift cards to grocery shops so that we are continuing to support our families that are in need of food or food insecure throughout the district. And we are making sure that as we come back, each one of our schools has a food pantry so that social workers will continue to be able to support kids that come into the building that may need food throughout the day.
Where is 600 boxes is a lot. Where did that happen?
So we gave those out at the Welcome Center. We did advertise it, and our social workers put that out on in their communities with their families. But we give it out at the Welcome Center. Lineup starts at normally about 8:30, 9 o'clock. The truck arrives at 9. We unload it, and then we start giving those boxes out at 9:30. And it will be again this Tuesday. We will be giving those boxes out again.
Is that something where it would be helpful if board members wanted to volunteer, or is that something where it wouldn't be helpful to have random volunteers show up? How do you organize volunteers?
So right now, we haven't asked for volunteers. We have 12 social workers, and they show up. We don't come dressed professionally, but we are dressed to lift boxes, put them in cars, and we keep it going. So we don't have parents get out. You either unlock your back door or you pop your trunk. We would, I'm not saying we don't want volunteers. Board members are welcome to come, but we want to limit, who we have coming just for safety reasons. Everyone has masks on, and we just load up and keep cars moving through, and they come right through and run right out of the Welcome Center parking lot.
That's really great. I'm excited about the food pantries at, did you say that's all the schools or all the elementary schools?
No, each one of our schools has a food pantry. We only had one school that was without a true pantry, but that social worker is new, and we are building that pantry as we speak. So we have the food. He actually was moving food this week as well into his pantry so that he would have a pantry ready for students when they return, actually on October 27th.
Wow, that's really great.
Ms. Cobbs, I do have a follow-up question. So I know the food pantry is very important, but I know also clothing, shoes, and that's something I've been impressed with. Is that school also have, if you will, the clothes pantry that will be available to students as well?
Yes, he is building that, and we are supporting that, and the other social workers throughout the district are supporting that as well. But he has a community list of volunteers for that school that he's going to be reaching out to make sure that he builds that as well. And I think that there were some things already there from the previous social worker, so that there are things that we will be building on so that he has that. So that social worker did have food resources to give families. She didn't just have a specific area designed, but now we do. And we're building that for him as well.
That's fantastic.
Ms. Cobb, are we tied into the Orange County Food Council and OCIM and even social services for some of this?
Yes, ma'am. We work with OCIM, and the previous child nutrition director worked with the first organization that you named. And we work,
Orange County Food Council.
yes, ma'am. And we worked together to make sure that we had everything, like we communicated with them through her as well as DSS. We have our own lines of communication with them, and OCIM,
Right.
we work closely with them as well.
Great.
Thank you, Ms. Cobb. All right. Well, we got through our list of ideas, and we will, I'll follow up. I'll try to summarize some of the action items we have and send that out after the meeting. So let's go on to this.
Ms. Doyle, there was
Yes.
one additional comment that I wanted to add to a topic we moved on, was on the meeting in person. I think as part of that conversation, we just need to talk about in person versus open to the public, right? Because I know a lot of, well, I shouldn't say a lot. I know school boards are meeting in person, but there is no public attendance, right? So in other words, they're in their area, they have, their distance and, the plastic and all that, but there are no public people. There's not people commenting. They are online. They are physically meeting in person. So I think as part, to Hillary's point, when we had that conversation, I don't want us to limit it to just, hey, when are we going to have a quote public meeting? Maybe there's a step in between where we can accommodate everybody or, show our progression, if you will.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. So thank you, Mr. Atherton. Okay. All right. So we've talked about the ideas. We've talked about the board member office hours. It looks like we're going to go ahead with Monday evening, like finding a Monday evening where we don't have a board meeting scheduled, and a Saturday morning. And I will get that worked out and send that out. The social emotional learning surveys, I sent that link out again that Ms. Cobb shared. Does everyone have that? I'm going to pull up mine. Do you want to talk about these, Ms. Cobb? Or do you want us to talk about them, or what do you think?
It is up to you. I'm open to either option.
Okay. Let's see.
So it's grayed out.
Oh, really? You can't
Are
see
you
my
share-
screen?
No. Did you share desktop or share application?
Oh, I do not know. Let me see.
Yeah, maybe just stop sharing and reshare.
Okay. This thing big again. Let's see. Let's see. I'm losing where I did this. Let's see.
It'll be at the top of the screen since you're in.
Oh, I see. Okay.
What it looks like is before you just shared an application versus desktop, but you can do it however you want. Yep, we can see it.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So, I've looked at this and I start processing a little bit, and then I get a little bit like I'm not sure. I don't want to overread into it, or so maybe do you want to present it, Ms. Cobb, and tell us the conclusions you came to? And you can share your screen if you want, or I can just click through the slides.
Whichever is easiest for you is fine with me.
If you wouldn't mind talking about what you're seeing, and I'm happy to share it unless you'd rather share it, but I have it pulled up, so.
Okay, that's fine. We can leave it as it is right here. I want to make sure because one of the slides I had to correct, but what you're seeing here are the survey results from the grade 3 through 5 survey compared to our district demographics for grades 3 through 5. And then the next slide would be 6 through 12. But for 3 through 5, when you look at this slide, it is saying, like in grade 3, across the district, there are 503 students, and then 299 students actually participated in the survey. So we had in each of our areas, 3rd through 5th grade, over half of the students in those grade levels across the district participated in the survey. And then when you look at it by race, the same thing. In our district total, grades 3 through 5, we have 220 African American or Black students, and 145 participated in the survey, as well as 413 Hispanic students. 249 participated in the survey. And you'll notice that in grades 3 through 5 versus grades 6 through 12, there are more races listed in grades 6 through 12. It's just indicating that in 3 through 5, we did not have enough to make a subgroup for the data. Okay, so if you want to go to the next slide. The next slide.
Can I just interrupt to add, like, one thing I'm noticing is, so it looks like we're saying about 3/4 of our white students responded. And a little bit closer to half of our, like, so part of what I'm seeing is that we're getting an overrepresentation of our white student responses. Do you see it that way?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That is true, grades 3 through 5. Understanding that with some of this, you know, there may have been some assistance needed and, or, you know, to help some of the lower grade students participate in the survey.
Okay. Let's see.
So this is, again, grade 6 through 12 survey. If you look at it, and this is just telling us, again, the number of students in that grade level across the district compared to the number of students that took the survey. One thing that we noticed is for 6th through 8th grade, as the grades went up, the number of students that participated went up. So for 6th through 8th grade, we started with 6th grade, we had 508 students in the district, 389 participated in the survey. We have 558 7th graders across the district, 436 participated in the survey. And then in 8th grade, we have 601 students across the district and 466 participated in the survey. When we looked at 9th grade, the numbers were a little bit different. The 9th graders, we had a little bit more participation. We had 649 across the district, 376 participated. 10th grade, 631 students and 355 participated. And then 11th grade, 548 and 283. And then 12th grade, 542 and 290 students participated in the survey. So our upper grade level students did not participate as well as our 9th and 10th grade students did.
Okay. Yeah, so I was just gonna say, to highlight your point, about 77% of the 8th graders participated and about 53% of the 12th graders. So it's like they needed, in middle school, they all were capable and they all sort of bought in and did it. And as they got older, they opted out a little bit. Or maybe it wasn't, you know, I could also see having a middle schooler, they might have gotten a lot of, you know, the homeroom teachers in the middle school really tie the kids into daily activities.
Correct.
In a way that I'm not sure when you're, you know, a junior or senior independently taking classes. I don't know that you get that same sort of daily coaching for what's going on in the school that you do with the middle school grades.
That could be a part of it as well. Yes, ma'am. And then in our 6th through 12th grade, when we looked at it by race, our Asian American students, we have 58 across the district, 38 of them participated in the survey. Of the 582 Black students across the district, 325 participated in the survey. We have 1,018 Hispanic students and 559 participated in the survey. We have 7 students of indigenous race that participated. 5 of them participated in the survey. We have a multiracial group of students, 228, 105 45 participated in the survey. And then of our white students, 2,144, 1,523 participated in the survey. Are there questions, any clarity I need to provide, or questions answered?
I'm sorry I didn't invite everyone else to comment so far. Not, I can keep going. A few more
Okay.
slides.
Yes, ma'am. So this first survey talks about academic needs. So I wanna preface all of this by saying, when we talk about a favorable response, we're talking about students that responded in a favorable way. So if they're asking a question about I think the first one talks about in their academic needs, you feel like you can do well right now in our learning model that we have. When we say favorable, we're saying the students said, yeah, I think I'm doing really well, or I'm extremely sure that I can do well. That's what they mean by that. So for that question, overall, 61% of, when we talked about academic needs, 61% of the responses from grades 3 through 5 were favorable. The first question asked, do you feel like you're doing well right now? 63% of our 3rd through 5th graders felt like, oh yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I'm either doing extremely well, or I feel like I'm extremely sure of what we're doing right now, to quite sure, or somewhat sure. So 63% were in a favorable response. When we talked about getting the help that you need for your schoolwork, 68% of the students responded in a favorable nature. Question 3 asks, the difficulty or ease to connect to the internet to access the work. 61% felt like that they were favorable in their response to that question in grades 3 through 5. And then in 6th through 12th grade, 65% of those students responded favorable around academic needs. And the breakdown was, for doing well right now, 50% were favorable in getting the help that they need with schoolwork, 76 were favorable, and the difficulty or ease to connect to the internet to access the work, 68% of those were favorable. So in the contrast to that, when we say difficulty or ease to connect to the internet to access their work, when we say 68% are favorable, we recognize that that means that at least 32% of our students don't feel favorable or feel like they are having some difficulty. And so our goal now is to look at this data and then look at what resources we need to put in place to support those students, recognizing that some of it could be access to internet, but some of it could be, understanding how to move between on the internet and move between the different virtual apps that we are using to provide that instruction. Questions?
I have a question. So that's really helpful. So the percentages in the 30s for the different age groups, some difficulty with the internet. So how then is that being teased out at this point? Is that like at a school level, or is there something else to tease out what makes up that 30% of the challenges?
So for this question, one second. So we are sharing at the district level. I've shared this data with the different directors that are affected under this, and then they will be working with the schools as well as coordinators to determine what are those difficulties, and then what are those things that we can control from the district or school level versus those things that we have to figure out what else can we do if it is an internet issue or concern. Dr. Felder, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, it was pretty much going to say what you just said. I mean, some things we do know. Again, cell towers. We know that some families have access, but low broadband. So there are a variety of issues there. And as Ms. Cobb said, there are some that we can help mitigate, and there are some that cannot.
And also,
The
I
schools
want to
have a good handle on which students are not connecting or have difficulty connecting, and what those reasons are.
and we've also just received in the last few days the breakdown of this data so that we can share it with principals as far as individual students' responses, so then they could look at that and be able to pull out, well, Sharita said she's having difficulty. We know she's got internet. We know what is that difficulty, so that we're able to go to specific students. But we just received that data, and now we have to tease it out by school so that we can then share it, and the principals can begin working with those, and social workers and counselors can begin working with those specific students.
So I have a couple of questions. This is very helpful. And I like the idea of, I hear that you're working with it with the schools. I first wondered, even in the responses, is there a difference by race? And did we take an income look? And then there's and always remembering that these are the responses within the population that responded, that we still have between 25 and 50% of the kids in each category who didn't respond. And so we don't know how they would respond to any of these. So, but I think that, my guess is the schools know that. So I guess I just wanted to point that out, that there's a kind of a baked in distortion in the numbers. If I had to guess, it would make, the numbers are actually not quite as good as they look here.
Correct. And yes, ma'am, we do have that data teased out by race and by specific grade level that we can share with our schools. But they have access to this data as well.
Okay.
So the next question speaks to the learning model. And that question is specifically asking about the difficulty and or ease to use the distance learning technology, meaning the app, maybe their computer or tablet, or getting on the video calls, if it's Zoom, if it's WebEx, whatever it is, the difficulty and or ease of the student being able to access that app or that piece of technology. And so for that grades 3 through 5, 43% of the responses were favorable. And by breaking that down, again, that question was difficulty or ease to use the distance learning technology, meaning the app, the tablet, the computer, or video calls. 43% responded that it was very easy or slightly easy to use. 15% responded neither difficult or easy, and 42% responded slightly difficult to very difficult. So in this instance, we are concerned in looking at, what resources we have and what we can do to support students grade 3 through 5, when it looks like 42% out of the 1,113 students that responded felt like that they were having slightly some difficulty or a lot of difficulty accessing those apps. In grades 6 through 12, 45% of those responses overall were favorable. When broken down and asked, 45% responded very easy to slightly easy. 16% responded neither difficult or easy, but we had 39% of those students that responded that it was slightly difficult or very difficult. And we had 2,595 students, grades 6 through 12, that responded, and 39% said it's slightly difficult to very difficult for them to access the use of distance learning technology.
So just to make the point, because it's easy for me to get lost and I happen to remember the point. But so for both those sets of grades, 61 and 65% for grades 3 to 5 and 6 to 12 respectively, felt favorable in terms of I'm doing well overall. So even though something in the 60s, early, several slides back, said they were doing well, only in the 40s did the ones who respond felt that they were confident with the learning model. So some felt they were doing well, even though it was hard for them, or?
Correct. I think, yes. So what it's saying is that, 61, I believe it was 61% of the kids were saying, oh yeah, this is good. I think I'm doing well, right? So 3 through 5, 61% said, I feel like I'm doing well, but then even though I'm doing well, I'm having some difficulty accessing the technology, the learning technology. So 42% said, yep, I'm still having some difficulty, but some of them may still feel like they're doing well. They're just pushing through it.
So I'd like to share some perspective. I'm not sure how this plays into this, but I've talked to many parents and students directly. As y'all know, I have a high schooler. And part of the frustration that I'm hearing isn't the technology itself, but the model in which it's being taught now. And I'll give an example. And again, not a teacher, but just want to share, is typically in a class, the way the class is laid out, there's, let's say, I'm just going to make it up for effect, 30 minutes of instruction, 15 minutes of work where the student would do work in the class, kind of showing that they've learned the skill and the mastery. And then the last 15 minutes of, hey, are there any additional questions? Here's going to be your homework. Go ahead and, any other questions, contact me later. And then they leave. Under the new model, and again, this is feedback I'm getting. I'm not in the classes, so I'm just sharing, is that now the full duration is focused on the material. And when they get homework, they're not getting that time where they're actually getting time to try the material and the teacher walking around to say, oh, no, you're, try this or that. And so there's anxiety that's being built because now when they turn in their homework, they're not confident, am I doing it correctly? Because they didn't have that practice that they normally would have gotten in the school and the immediate feedback. Now, obviously, there's huge technology issues with that on, how would a teacher virtually walk around and see what they're writing or, hold it up. But I just wanted to share that because it's been a common theme that I've translated from what I've heard in the model being different. And it wasn't really about, is Zoom working or, Canvas, but it was just, I don't feel confident when I get to the homework because I haven't had that time with the teacher or the class. But I just wanted to share that as just data.
Thank you, Mr. Atherton. That's helpful. Sharita, this piques my curiosity, and maybe I missed it, but did you share what some of the questions were with regards to this particular item? Because if the question, I'm just trying to understand what were some of the questions in the learning model segment.
Yeah,
I can share that. One second. The learning model question, the specific question, and if I'm not mistaken, there was only one question in that model, and the specific question said, how difficult or easy is it to use the distance learning technology, computer, tablet, video calls, learning applications, etc.? So that was the specific question that was asked. And then just so we're clear, the specific questions for the learning model, let me go back one second. Academic needs, I apologize. The specific questions in that one, and there were 4, was the first one said, how sure are you that you can do well in school right now? The second one stated, are you getting all the help you need with your schoolwork right now? And then the other one was, are there any subjects you need help with right now, which was more specific to the school that we shared with, that we would share with the schools so that students will, parents and, staff will know the specific areas that students may be having difficulty as far as subjects are concerned. And then the last question said, how difficult or easy is it for you to connect to the internet to access your schoolwork? So that was the very first one when we talked about academic needs.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's very helpful.
Thank you.
Sharita, first I have a couple questions. This is really surprising response to me. But when was the survey done?
The survey was given September 14th, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay,
It was given during that week, over the course of a week, so that schools had the opportunity to give students a chance to take the survey.
So we were well into online learning because there's a general sense that things are better now than they were at the beginning. And I wondered, this kind of seems to be kind of in the transition period where things should have been getting better. The shocker to me is that 6 to 12 isn't doing better. I would have guessed that the older kids are having an easier time with the technology than the younger kids. And so am I the only one that has that? Because I'm hearing, the older kids are having no trouble with technology, and the survey says different. So it's kind of the same.
Well, Bonnie, that's why I said that, because what I'm hearing is the computer stuff, they got that, but it's the model is where they're struggling, or where I hear the anxiety from. Let me just say it that way. But that's why I brought it up, because I didn't know the questions, but what I'm hearing is the anxiety that's being created from having to turn the work in. It's graded, it affects their grade. And there's some kids that are normally A students that are having difficulties that they're trying to figure out why. Anyway, that's why I brought up that context, because I don't think, anyway, the people I've talked to, as Clarity has indicated, it's not the computer, it's the method now.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Ms. Hauser.
No, so you're suggesting that if I looked at 3 to 5, because I'm also hearing some of more parents, younger parents, the computers are failing, they're having trouble with the hotspots. So that it's not that they can't get online, but the technologies, the physical technology is failing. And Will, you're suggesting that there might be that difference, that with the younger kids, the physical technology is failing, but with the older kids, the learning delivery through technology may not be working the way we hope.
Just for clarity, Bonnie, I'm just adding that's a factor that I'm aware of. I would not pre-propose that it is the reason for these numbers. I'm just saying it is a factor. And if I wouldn't have had the detailed discussions about, tell me why you feel it's different, and them explaining the time and that, I wouldn't have understood that subtle difference. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that's a component that I'm aware of. But I would leave that to maybe Dr. Felder or Bob's on.
I'm sorry, Ms. Stoll.
Well, I just was going to say, and fully respecting Mr. Atherton's point, but and I think he and I both had probably similar experiences, but with my 3 kids, I can have 3 totally different answers. But the teens in my life, I'm not hearing. It's interesting that you say that, because I'm actually not hearing that. I'm hearing comfort with the learning model. So all that to say, there is variability in it. It's hard to know. That's my point. Not to discount them all.
To your point, Mrs. Doyle, I think that's why it's going to be important for schools to dig deep into the data and have conversations with students to nuance it. So the other question, sounded like it was getting more at the actual devices, the technology itself, the apps, and as Ms. Cobb provided the context for that. But until the schools have conversations with the students to a deeper dive and a discussion about the data to get that qualitative piece, we won't know. And so another way, and I don't know if this was part of the survey, but something we may want to consider as we do intend to administer a like survey 2 more times this year, would be to have a comment section where students can provide more information. But at any rate, schools have access to the data and can certainly drill it down to the individual student, and in order to glean a deeper understanding of what these data really mean.
Okay, we have a couple more slides, Ms. Cobb.
Yes, ma'am. So the next slide speaks to student relationships. And so in this grades 3 through 5, and I want to make sure that I give you the specific questions because I don't want it to be, so I'm going between 2 screens right here. So bear with me for a second. But in grades 3 through 5, when it talked about student relationships, the overall response, there were 52% of the responses were favorable. When it was broken out by the specific questions, are there adults at your school you can go to for help if you need it right now? 75% of the students responded favorably, saying, yes, there are adults that I can go to and I know who they, I can go to them. And right now, if I needed help. And then it stated, how connected do you feel to the adults at your school right now? 45% of those students responded favorably. When, let me come back to the, so we were really concerned about that. And then one of the questions, the last question that we included stated, how often does your teacher reach out to you? 50% responded almost every day, 19% responded several times a week, 16% about once a week, 12% once every few weeks. So our concern in this one, especially grades 3 through 5, was the fact that we had 75% of the students said, I have an adult that I could go to right now if I needed to. But then when connected to adults in your school, only 45% felt extremely connected to quite connected. So that gave us concern because, you know who to go to, but are you connected to anyone? So we talked with our lead social worker and lead counselors who are now working with staff to help them be able to have resources on how to develop relationships with students within the building so that we can make sure that students feel connected, not just knowing who to go to, but feel connected in their building. For grades 6 through 12, 41% of the responses were favorable in this when we talked about student relationships. The first question asked, do you know the adults you can go to in your school right now? 79% of the students said, yes, I know who I can go to right now. When connected to adults in your school, only 26% felt extremely connected or quite connected to adults in the school building in grades 6 through 12. And then how often does your teacher reach out to you? 29% said almost every day, 26% said several times a week, 27% said about once a week, and 15% stated once every few weeks. And so we, again, are working with, when we saw those comparisons between, knowing who to go to right now and then being connected, we did feel a lot of concern. And so we did, again, speak to our lead social worker and counselor about working with staff about resources on how to connect with students so that all the students feel like they have somebody that they are actually connected to, not just knowing who to go to in their building.
Right. If I could just add, just a reminding that this is of the people who responded to the survey, the folks
Correct.
that didn't respond to the survey. I'm guessing that these numbers look really different.
Yes, ma'am. Correct.
And if I could just add, so while the data are certainly raise some concerns, I do wonder, because I don't know for sure, but I wonder, despite our best efforts, if the data will continue to look this way as long as we continue to be in remote learning. There's just not, but so much connecting that can happen through a screen. And so I wonder, because I know that our staff, our teachers are doing a phenomenal job. I know that for a fact, that they're doing a phenomenal job reaching out to students, staying connected. Our social workers, if we don't hear from a student within a day or so, they're on it. They are knocking on doors. They're going to places of business. They are finding what's going on. So I don't think this is due to a lack of effort. While of course there's always room for improvement, that's always the case with everything in a pandemic or not. I simply have concluded for myself again that it's just where we are with regards to remote learning. Certainly understand why we're here, but I think until we can get back to in person, the data probably won't change. So it'll be interesting to see what the data looks like in the months to come. Yeah.
Okay, so I apologize. The next slide is cultural awareness and action. This was one of the questions that was asked on the survey, but only to grades 6 through 12. And this question specifically asked the student, hold on one second, pull that back up. The first question asked, with cultural awareness and action across the board, grades 6 through 12, noting that we had 2,595 students that took this survey and answered this question, 25% of them rated this question favorably, right? And so the first question asks, how often do teachers encourage you to learn about people from different races and ethnicities or cultures? I'm coming back to, and only 26% of those students rated that question favorably. When we looked at question 2, how often do you think about what someone of a different race or ethnicity or culture experiences? 37% of those responses were favorable. The third question asks, how confident are you that students at your school can have honest conversations with each other about race? 29% of those responses were favorable. And we can stop right here before we go to the next question and see if there are any questions and or responses to this data. And I believe that Dr. Keeling is on the call as well.
I just want to interject as a parent that those numbers seem low because, I mean, I've been seeing, in what I see in my kids, I've been seeing a lot of encouragement to learn about people from different cultures, and I'm really pleased to see that, particularly this school year, one of the teachers having, bringing attention during Hispanic Heritage Month. I think I'm getting the name of that wrong, but different scientists who have contributed different things every week. So anyway, I don't want to take any more time. Dr. Keeling, do you have something to share with us about this?
Yes, I do. So a couple of points to this. One is that this past month I started meeting with our equity leads. So if you'll remember, every school has a school-based equity team, and each of those teams has identified either one or two other equity leads. And so one of the items on the agenda for September was, how is your school recognizing Hispanic Heritage Month? How are you, or how will you? So that was something that they were tasked with doing. So I think that as we continue to work with the leads, hopeful that we will see some of these numbers start to change, because this is the direct work that the leads are doing. And for our meeting for October, we will be digging into this data to identify what are some next steps that need to happen in schools. But I also found, like, looking at the 2020 teacher working conditions survey, there is a question on there about equity. And so those questions, remember, just go to teachers and staff. And so just to kind of juxtapose what the students are experiencing and what the teachers are experiencing, there's a question that asks, this school emphasizes showing respect for all students' cultures, beliefs, and practices. And across our district, that was 90% favorable. That's from the responses and from the teacher perspective. And then there was another question that says, this school provides instructional materials that reflect the diverse backgrounds of our students and community. And across the district, that had a 76% favorable response. So there's a gap here in what the students are seeing and what teachers are doing. And so we're going to work with the equity leads to begin to close that gap, and we can definitely talk more about that next month after I discuss the data with them and see what comes out as some of our next steps.
I'm curious at how actually Dr. Keeling's responses, but in general in the survey, how these responses vary by race. Do we know?
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, I had to unmute and sit up. So when we looked at this data for this question, so it's broken out by specific questions around race. So the first question asks, how often do teachers encourage you to learn about people from different races, ethnicities, or cultures? And we had a 26% favorable response to that question. When we looked at breaking it out by race, and it was almost always, frequently, and sometimes, once in a while, and almost never. Our Asian American students, 41% of them responded favorably. Our Black students, 35% responded favorably. Our Hispanic or Latino students responded, 34% responded favorably. We did not have enough students in our indigenous group to respond for a number to be able to be calculated. Our multiracial students, 43 responded favorably, and our white students, 39% responded favorably.
So how do you get to 20? Wait. So if those are the numbers, how do you get to 26% favorable? Because all the numbers are higher.
I think the low number for the indigenous students. So they didn't give us a number, but I know that we had indigenous students respond. So they must have responded in the unfavorable manner for the number to go down. But that is the number for. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong question.
Yeah, no, the numbers. Question 2, what you're saying would make sense, but question 1, no, the numbers don't add up.
Yeah,
I apologize.
I have it pulled up, Sharita. So for how often do teachers encourage you to learn about people from different races, ethnicities, and cultures, which overall was the 26%.
Yes, I got it pulled up now. I apologize. Right. So our Asian students, it was 10% favorable. Yes. Our Black students was 23% favorable. Our Hispanic students or Latino students was 25% favorable. Our indigenous students was 20% favorable, and multiracial students 27% favorable, and then our white students 27% favorable. I apologize. I was looking at the wrong question.
So fairly consistent across the board. That's surprising. Yes, okay.
Mm-hmm. The next question asks, and I'm just going to stay on my chart, on my survey data chart. It's how often do you think about what someone of a different race or ethnicity or culture experiences? When we looked at it by race, the total number for that one was 37% favorable. Oh, no, wait a minute. Yes, 37% favorable. And so our Asian students was 41%, our Black students was 35%, Hispanic or Latino students was 34%, Our indigenous students did not have a percentage rate on this one. And then our multiracial students was 43%, and then our white students was 39%. The third question was, how confident are you that students at your school can have honest conversations with each other about race? The total number of percentage of responses favorable was 29%. When we break that down by race, 21% of our Asian students said were favorable. 23% of the responses were favorable from our Black students, 29% from our Hispanic students, 25% from our indigenous students, 25% from our multiracial students, and 31% from our white students. The next question, which would be I think this is our third or fourth question. At your school, how often are you encouraged to think more deeply about race-related topics? 18% of the students that responded favorably. So when we broke it down by race, 21% of the Asian students responded favorably, 17% of our African American and Black students responded favorably, 19% of our Hispanic or Latino students responded favorably. None of our indigenous students responded favorably to that question. 20% of our multiracial students responded favorably, and 17% of our white students responded favorably. The next question asks, when there are major news events related to race, on how often do adults at your school talk about them with students? We only had a 13% favorable rate on that question. And when broken out by race, 13% of our Asian students responded favorably, 13% of our African American or Black students responded favorably, 15% of our Hispanic or Latino students responded favorably, none of our indigenous students responded favorably, 10% of our multiracial students responded favorably, and then 13% of our white students responded favorably. And the last question was, how well does your student or your school help students speak out against racism? 29% of the students responded favorably to that question. And when broken out by race, 28% of our Asian students responded favorably, 25% of our Black students responded favorably, 34% of our Hispanic or Latino students responded favorably. None of our indigenous students responded favorably to that question. 29% of our multiracial students responded favorably, and 28% of our white students responded favorably to that question.
I'd like to note for a number of these, I'm pleased that I think it's a problem when the white population sees that race-related conversations are happening better than, for example, Black or Hispanic population. So I'm happy to see that there's actually a pretty consistent match. Do you know what I'm saying? Like we don't have the white students saying that the schools do a great job talking about race, and then the Black and Hispanic students not saying that. That would be a little bit more concerning. I am concerned that we don't have positive responses from our indigenous students, even though I know there are few. Thank you so much, Ms. Cobb. Any questions for Ms. Cobb?
Yeah, no, I just want to agree with you, Carrie. I mean, I'm happy that the equity or the cultural awareness is consistently problematic across all races. So we have work to do, but it seems to be reaching, and I'm interested in Dr. Keeling's comment that the perception amongst the teachers is different than the perception amongst the students. So that's, but this is a great start.
Yeah, I agree. I think, getting to the communication methods that students want to have and need to have is going to be a big part of that, given the big gap.
Okay, this ties in a little bit. I kind of felt uncertain about sending this out. It doesn't totally tie into our topic in terms of what we should be doing as a board or anything, but I emailed out links to the Trevor project, which I wrote somewhere how it describes itself. it defines itself as like speaking up for LGBTQ mental health related issues and sort of looking at data and polls. When I sent you that poll information, there are several PDFs you can download and get like deeper and deeper into the data. And I don't necessarily want us to do that today. And especially in light of all that Ms. Cobb has going on with the upcoming teen mental health night. But this, I do feel like this is a interesting and important piece. Essentially, it says that our the intersectionality of our Black students with our LGBTQ students have greater depression and anxiety during this time. And I think that's important for us to keep in mind that there's higher levels of feelings of despair or feeling like lack of ability to talk to someone who understands. So if you haven't had time to look over this, does anyone want to bring out anything from this topic? Let's see where the key points. And as we've mentioned before, this also is our community that's most likely to be homeless. Like there's a link between our homeless youth and our LGBTQ youth that we've seen from some other advocacy groups have put that information forward. So I just want to keep this in mind as we're thinking about concerns for our students and supporting them.
Can I hear more about that? You know, because, you know, about homelessness and LGBT students. These are, you know, is there an age? Is there a reason? I'd like to hear more about that trend and what that means for us.
I can send the information I have with that, Bonnie. It's from another advocacy group. I can send out that data, but I think that sometimes it's a experience of family rejection causing the homelessness. This is not particular to our district. I don't know what numbers look like in our district. This is more like national data. So.
Yeah, I'm really interested in our district, our national, you know, I mean, I understand the basic pattern, but I was curious if this is an issue for our kids. Because I'm not seeing any numbers anywhere that suggest that it's an issue for us. But if it is, I'd really like to hear about it.
Well, I think it also just emphasizes the importance of the policy work that we're going to be doing, supporting our LGBTQ students. It's timely. Okay, so this has been shared with everyone, and I think yes.
This is Ms. Cobb. I do the McKinney-Vento as far as our homeless students is concerned. And I just want to say that while we do support and serve our homeless and our McKinney-Vento students, we don't necessarily specifically ask them about LGBTQ status. And if that is a part of the reason why they are McKinney-Vento or homeless. When a student starts to describe or let a social worker know that they are homeless, they complete a form, but we do not ask that, and that information is not shared. Now, they may share that with the social worker, and I ask them not to share that with me because I want the student to have a level of confidence in their privacy with that social worker. So we may not know unless a student shares, you know, I got put out of my home. We don't delve down into those kinds of specifics about, you know, is it because you were LGBTQ or, you know, we just try to provide as much support and resources for that student and or family as possible.
Thank you, Ms. Cobb. That's really helpful. So I think we should set this aside, in my opinion, so we can save a little time to look at the asset map, but we can always bring this topic back if people want to. Is everyone okay with me moving on? Okay, so this next item is looking at the district asset map that Ms. Stowe and others presented to us last month. I'm about to pull that up, but I also want to remind you, I sent out a link today. This is what, I'm going to show you the link and then go to the asset map, but just to keep this in mind, this is what the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools has set up. They have board members as liaisons for these different committees. And so a lot of these are like what we're calling primary and secondary assets. And so this just seems really helpful. It's something we might want to consider doing at some point. But for now, let's look at the asset map itself, because our goal in bringing this forward was to help identify the different stakeholders in our district and where we have gaps as board members being sort of tuned in and where we possibly have gaps as a district. This is 14 pages long. And I emailed that back out to our board members today. So maybe it might be more helpful to look at your own screen. But so it's broken into different sections. And again, the primary assets are the ones that are basically sponsored by our district, whereas a secondary asset is a partnering organization is the sponsor, and Orange County Schools has an established contribution, whereas a potential asset is more of a transitory sort of relationship, sort of ad hoc. So we talked about the subcommittees. We talked about some of the teacher, we talked about teacher focus groups, and there's mentoring for beginning teachers. Okay, we spent some time last month, talked about all the different equity, the school-based equity teams, and Dr. Keeling was talking about the equity leads, the equity task force that presents to our district, we hope, for a second time this year. Is that right, Dr. Keeling? Sorry to put you on the spot there.
Sorry. Yes, that is correct. You said about us meeting together, right?
Yes. Is that something we're thinking about for this fall? Do I remember correctly that maybe this before Christmas we could have a second meeting, the equity task force?
Right. So, and I just presented this to them at the last meeting. It's a future agenda item. We didn't discuss it, but trying to have a fall meeting as well as a spring meeting. So kind of the fall meeting is kind of what are some recommendations and what's kind of the plan for the year. And then the spring meeting will be much like the spring meeting that we did last year. Here's the things that we've accomplished and worked on this year. If that's fine with you all.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, is that something, it's the beginning of October, is that something realistic to have at a board meeting between now? Great, that'd be awesome. Okay. And then we talked about last time how the student equity teams, that's something, there needs to be a level of like confidentiality for students or safe spaces for students that maybe a group of students would choose to present to the board like they did in the spring at some point. Okay, here are some of our outside groups. I don't know if this is helpful how I'm going through it or not. If you want to go through it a different way, just tell me. Otherwise, I'm just kind of scrolling. Okay, I'm just gonna, there's a bunch of names here. I'm just gonna keep going. The Orange County Health Equity Team, the Family Success Alliance, the My Brothers and Sisters Keeper, which I didn't know we had. We got information from a number of our subcommittees. Mr. Atherton, have you been involved with this Business Advisory Council? I know you have some CT interests or connections. Is that what this is?
Yes, that is the official Business Advisory Council. We do have a policy around this. It is required. And it's a great program and process. It's one of our valuable assets. It's one of those that we looked at last year as well. And essentially the way it works is there's different reps from different companies and they roll off of it. They talk about upcoming needs in the community, classes, what are the value items, and they go through it. I've been impressed with it, given that it's one of those things that puts our community in line with what the specific needs are.
So do they have like monthly or quarterly meetings? Like, do you go to them, or like, how does that work?
Yeah, it's actually on our website because they are public meetings. So you can look on our website to see when the meetings are. But I think they were set up quarterly is what I remember based on, I mean, we've got Dr. Felder, she can tell us, but I believe they were quarterly set up because a lot of the business members, are really tied for having time and to participate. But we've been very fortunate to have some of the leaders from the business community in there.
So this kind of addresses one of the items that I put on that board member idea number 1. I feel like this kind of covers it, sort of what are auditing our connections for students in the local business community. It sounds like that's what this does.
Well, the downside of it, I shouldn't say a downside, it's a sample set of the business community, right? But I'll just do a plug-in of how fantastic Ms. Braxton does with reaching out to all of the businesses and engaging in opportunities for internships, looking at new job opportunities. This advisory board is more of guidance and direction, and there's this other connection of opportunities, right? Where, hey, we have students that are looking for internships or, doing work with a company. And that's separate from this. This is more directional and what are the needs of these businesses. But I just want to highlight there's 2 different kind of activities that go on.
Bill, could you contrast this? Can you contrast this to the chamber?
Well, that's what I was about to say. And you hit it, is that the chamber, where last year we did our first event where we did a signing event of the different businesses that actually signed our students directly into jobs. There were linemen, there were, landscaping, various different jobs that we partnered with the chamber on putting that on. I would highlight that we're doing stuff with other businesses that are not in the chamber, right? That they're so small that they don't do that. But like I said, Ms. Braxton has done a fabulous job in keeping those connections and growing them and making sure, students that are in these programs, including I know, restaurants, even getting students that were taking, health and food safety and getting them opportunities in actual restaurants. So anyway, but to your point, Bonnie, they're separated. This is more, hey, what are our growth areas? Hey, we see health, we're doing expansion here, and the UNC hospital. Okay, what are the kind of skills and things that they're looking for? Hey, here's a small business within Orange County that's looking at, electronics. Here's one that's plumbing or, just various, and it's looking at what are those growth areas and what are those needs and skill sets versus the chamber and the direct interaction of, if you will, a placement, right, of opportunities.
Okay. So
Go ahead, Ms. Hauser.
this is a really long list, and it is the Orange County Partnership for Young Children, right? Some of these agencies, and even in this Business Advisory Council chamber, is a great illustration that some of them are almost statutory roles for our staff to be part of, and others are appropriate places for the board to engage in. But it would be helpful, I think, to distinguish that on the list. Where does the board belong? Where does the superintendent belong? Where does the staff belong? Because it's just a long list, an overwhelming list to me anyway.
Yeah, well, so some of it was to see, some of this came from feeling like we as a board needed some advisory groups or task forces, such as like a student advisory group for the board or a teacher advisory group. And so some of this was to see what's already in place in the district, some of which we, weren't aware of. And so to make sure that the district is hearing from all those stakeholders. But then again, like you're saying, Ms. Hauser, the question is, how do we as a board tap in and hear in these different contexts, or when is it not appropriate? So
if I may just add, so to your point, Ms. Hauser, these are all listed because staff are involved. So staff are involved with in every single one of these that are listed. These came from staff. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Got it. So it really is a kind of a staff, because that's what it looks like to me. The chamber, for example, is a place, and maybe it's just me as a board member, I feel like to some extent it's our job to help connect the district into community, not to think of things that staff is doing. And there's like one group that's been missing for me, and I'm not really sure what's right for us. And that's the MLK Collaborative. And especially with the, what do they call it? The oratorical contest, which involves kids. And I don't know if we're welcome there or, but it's a place where I think we can make, we might, school involvement might be able to help. I have no idea. The Kiwanis does so much for our kids. Tom Carr, former board member, Susan Halkiotis, former school board member. I don't know if Libby Huff is on it, but it's been a place for school board members to be involved in. But these are kind of outreaches into community that I wonder if we need to, the chamber, another one, there's a bunch of those that I just wonder if we should be looking at.
Okay, well, let's finish going through this map and see. So for example, one of the areas where we haven't historically had a good relationship of outreach is with the Indigenous community. So we're trying to improve that. Please tell me if I'm neglecting to notice some of those, but we've had that conversation a little bit. So we want to make sure our district is engaged in all areas. But again, we want to be engaged as a board so that we're informed in our decision making. Here's all the exceptional children pieces, and we had conversation around that advisory group. Is anyone else seeing any listed here that we want to speak up about?
So one I have a question about, and maybe a question for Ms. Cobbs, is I didn't see teen court. I saw the Orange County Department of Justice and Adult Court, and I know we pay for a liaison. Is that all covered under the Orange County DJJ and adult court? Because I thought teen court was slightly different, where there's peers and things like that.
So I'm looking at the form, and where it says Department of Juvenile Justice, that I included meant for that to include all of those things that you're speaking of.
Okay.
Because we have so many different pieces to that we actually work with them on. So I didn't want to, but I can go back and list them all out specifically if you would prefer.
Well, I just what I worry about is, since I've been able to look a little deeper into that whole area, I think if we would just list out in the description teen court, so it's not just viewed as the older kids, because I think that's an important part of us trying to reduce the pipeline to prison and understanding how that part of our courts work. It's been an impressive effort that y'all have done to help mitigate that and make sure we're doing the right thing. So anyway, I would just request if we could put teen court somewhere in there so people know it includes some of the younger students as well.
Yes.
Okay. And some of what I'm thinking, because this is just a lot, to the point that was mentioned earlier, when Ms. McKenzie makes a list of the different places that we can have a school board member representative, we can maybe see a little bit where we are already connected to some of these conversations with different community partners and where we as board members aren't as tuned in. Maybe that'll be a good place to narrow down where our own gaps are. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, one other one I'll highlight just for the benefit of the group is the Orange Partnership.
Mm-hmm.
This is a group that has Orange County Sheriff's Department, and they talk a lot about drug, alcohol abuse. I've attended some of their meetings just to listen, and this is where vaping. We brought vaping in from one of their speakers, from just listening to that, and just the magnitude of effort that goes in Orange County to help. When you have people that go in and attempt to buy, alcohol or tobacco products and see if they get carded, is it consistently, what is the policies and procedures? And it's just one of those that, was very insightful for me to just go to one of those meetings and listen, just to hear about some of the challenges they have, with Juuls and vaping, and, especially now that students are home, they may have more access, and, anyway, I just wanted to highlight that group because, like I said, I did attend, and it's very insightful of some of the things that they're working on and trying to address.
No, that's a good point. And I know as a middle school parent, vaping really impacts all the students in the school, because even the ones who aren't doing it, you have book bag rules, and, it really is an issue. We're not really seeing it right now because we're home, but we know from the news, I'm sure everyone's seen newspaper articles where substance use is up like 10 and 14%. So that's important. Okay, well, this is.
I want to comment on the Family Success Alliance Advisory Council. And there's a council and there's a navigators, because to me, sometimes the councils are the heads, but then there's the navigators that are actually doing the work on the ground. And they are an incredibly powerful organization, bottom-up grassroots organization of navigators that are advocating mostly for Latinx families. And so, and I would certainly be giving them a Culture and Climate X, but they are really powerful organization as far as I'm concerned. And they also funded, I don't know if they funded the readiness program at New Hope. So they're providing funding to our schools, and they're doing some pretty really impressive, innovative things. So I don't know what that means for this, but just need to say that.
That's a good point. And I've heard a lot of good things about them. I know some people who do work with them, but there's still like a lot more I'd like to know about how that works. Okay, sort of in that same topic, as we're reaching our last 20 minutes or so, there's a lot in here with our family outreach liaisons. Dr. Felder included some information in our board weekly updates, which had links. And that's why I mentioned I listened in on one of Ms. Blevko's presentations this week. And personally, I don't know how everyone else feels, but I'd really like to have on our list, possibly for next month, discussing information provided by Ms. Blevko. What are our family liaisons hearing and learning about student and family needs? There was the list of Parent Academy topics that she was preparing. Is that, personally, I would like to hear more, have her come and present to our committee so we can understand more of all what's going on and the feedback that she's getting. How does everyone else feel about that?
It's a good idea.
Yeah, agree.
And if we can implement between now and then the new, the sort of regular board office hours, maybe she can give us some feedback, her thoughts about that as well at that meeting, if we have other ways we want to pursue that kind of outreach. Okay, does anyone have questions about the asset map? It really feels like we could each spend 5 hours going through this thing, so I don't feel like I can do this justice in here. But I think the bottom line is we want to be seeing, and this has come up a lot today in this meeting, is where do we have board members able to be tuned in or listen in with these different connections we have.
I mean, I'll just throw this out there, Ms. Dahl, is that maybe we should make sure, one, that the full board sees this list, and, between Dr. Felder's recommendation and the board's interest, maybe we should see where that intersects, right? Because as Bonnie mentioned, several of us are involved in some manner, just not in an official capacity. And maybe we should make it more, hey, this person's going to update the board and their, board reports about some of the activities or perspectives on it, and make it more formal, like Chapel Hill's doing. When you look at their list, that's pretty impressive that, all the engagements and seeing that the full board is involved in multiple items, I think also helps the community understand of all the different areas we're engaging in.
That's a good point. I can talk with Ms. McKenzie about how to bring this to a full board meeting. That's a great way to wrap this up. And again, a big shout out to Ms. Stowe and all the staff, everything, just even creating this document, but also everything that it reflects here. So thank you.
And we appreciate that so much, Ms. Dole. If I could just add this one thing, and that is that this is phase one of an asset map. The next stage is to asset map what the schools are doing, because they too are very engaged. And so there are lots of student groups. There's just a lot going on at the school level as well. We haven't got there yet. That was our intention. We will get there. And so we will be able to present that soon as well.
Okay, that's great. Yes, you mentioned that last time, Dr. Felder, about how this is the district asset map, but we also have school asset maps. I didn't realize that we were going to have that nice presentation coming up. So that's wonderful. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to hear particularly from my fellow committee member, but from everyone else about what updates we might want to request for upcoming community engagement meetings. I mentioned Ms. Blefko's and the family outreach. Also, we might be hearing from Dr. Killing and the Equity Task Force.
I don't want to overwhelm our staff, given everything going on and all the planning. I think one of the questions, you know, or topics, I should say, I don't necessarily think updates is, you know, given our plan for January, you know, starting later this month for smaller groups, I think we should find out, you know, or have a deeper discussion on our outreach to getting the families that may not be survey centric, right? Because I think surveys are good. You know, they give you a perspective, but I worry about the voices and, you know, are there other things we could do or have a discussion about what ways we are looking at, you know, just because this is about outreach, maybe we can, you know, have a discussion about that and bring up ideas around that. And I'll just use this as an example. I don't know how this would fit in, but one of the more impressive things I think we did last year when we went into the pandemic and we were trying to figure out and, you know, looking for ways is we started distributing through Food Lion, right? You could go into Food Lion and boom, there it is, right? There is, you know, pick your grade, you pick it up, and there were other
Right.
organizations that we did that, you know, so I wonder if given this, you know, disconnected method we're in, are there other, you know, outside the box thinking, if you will, of engaging that maybe not real time, maybe it's, you know, disconnected in a way that we go to where people are and offer methods through there. Don't know where that's headed, but I'm just using that as an example of different engagement models because it was a perfect. And Dr.
Right.
Butler, I just want to thank you and the staff for that kind of engagement that y'all did in that time. It was very different, and I know many people were very grateful to be able to get access in those manners.
And Mr. Atherton, you're talking about like distributing like packets of homework and things, or are you talking about something else? There might have been something I wasn't aware of.
I was talking about getting feedback or updates or, you know, any number of ways. I was just using that as an example of a way that we figured out how to get to people that versus, you know, going to each person's house and handing it them. Hey, you're at the store, you pick it up, you know, but for the context of engagement, it could be any number of things. I was just using that as a out of the box way that we approached it.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I have to say this as an old time, I'll now speak as an old time community organizer, that if you want to get to the rural communities, the two ways are the dumps and the fire departments. That's how you get to them.
The fire departments is a great idea. That reminds me, and I don't know why it's not on the list that I had from the beginning, because I remember it was Ms. McKenzie who suggested board members on a bus. But
Hey, you know, that was just kind of a like over the top idea, which I think could be fun and cool, but I don't know that this is the moment in the middle of the pandemic for it. So, you know, whatever.
well, I'm thinking about distributing. I like the idea of thinking about how we can connect to families who aren't participating in surveys. And I don't know if that's something we want board members to do ourselves with board members who are comfortable doing that. I like the idea of doing it at Food Lion. I'm open to the bus idea.
Not the dumps.
I don't know about the dumps. The dumps isn't my favorite. I think I'd rather hang out at a fire department.
You'd be surprised how many people are at the dump on Saturday. You can meet all your neighbors there. Yeah. I can give you a vest.
So if I
my
may
family
share-
goes, but it's usually my husband, so I don't usually go with him.
Okay, so if I may share, to your comment, Mr. Atherton, you are spot on. We certainly have learned that when the district sends out a survey, we are not reaching every family, and it takes additional efforts. And we've done that when we sent out a survey in terms of district staff, central office staff reaching out, but then the schools reaching out. So for this next round of surveys, the schools are going to take care of it. And that way, we just save a step. They know how to get, it is additional work, I will say that. It's not an easy lift, and that's often why we attempt to send them out through the district, because it is a bit labor intensive. But yeah, so leveraging school-based staff as well as our social workers, that's the next phase of the work with getting the information that we need from families to help us continue planning.
So I guess another way to think about next month, Dr. Felder, is there something that's naturally happening between now and then? And if you don't know yet, that's fine. We can also play it by ear, because some of today's came from the wealth of information of recent emails you've shared with us. But if there's something we know that would be available for us to discuss at next month's meeting in regard to surveys and things to this point.
Oh yeah, we should have the next round of survey information from our families. That again, that this is data that we are collecting by way of the schools. Oh yeah, at least that's the goal.
That sounds great.
Yeah, is there a way to kind of throw the net out a little bit further? So rather than kind of overlay what we're already doing in schools, to say, what is the community and how do we engage with them? Because there's different stakeholders. It's not just parents and kids. There are people who are grandparents. There are people who are taxpayers. There's lots of people who are engaged and care about Orange County schools for lots of reasons. And I wonder if there's a way to, it's almost a reverse map. It's not an asset map. It's a market analysis that says, who are the stakeholder groups that we want to reach and how do we get to them? And then the second part of that is, what's the role of media? Because I think, I know Dr. Dawson just did a great interview on WHUP, and I was getting a lot of feedback on it because people were really thrilled to hear from her. And so do we want to, should someone, I don't know, it should be Dr. Felder, or because I don't want to make more work for Dr. Felder, but should the school district have a quarterly article in the News of Orange, just to give people an update about what's happening in our schools, and but just something that kind of casts the net, and not making them come to us, but we go to them, we meet them where they are. And I, again, very cautionary. It is a very crazy time, and I'm gonna always, say, are we making more work for our benefit? Community engagement shouldn't be for our benefit. It needs to be for theirs. And we haven't, would like to hear more asking. And maybe that's an assignment that you can give everybody on the committee, is go to one or two groups and say, what would you like from the?
Oh, I have an idea here, Bonnie. I have an idea here.
Go for it.
So
Okay.
News of Orange, very open to us providing information, but why don't we look to our students that are in journalism to do that and provide it to the News of Orange in some manner? I mean, they have an intern there that's a high school student from Orange County, but I think us looking at this as an opportunity to give somebody some experience in journalism, right? Hey, here's some top things that are going on in the district, or just anything. I think the more, like you said, that we're enabling our community and leveraging our students, I think I think that's beneficial to everybody, but that's just an idea. I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, I like that idea because,
Great idea. I'm about 95%. Yeah.
go ahead, Bonnie.
I think
You
it's
got-
got great internet.
Okay.
Dale Edwards would be happy to have a student's corner as a regular column in the paper and just let them have that. Would be really interested in our students getting more involved in our overall communication process and become kind of a subsidiary, almost a CI. But them kind of helping with the communication outreach from the school district. You know, so all of that, I think it's great.
Okay. So we can follow up that. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to share one thought and idea along this topic. And this is something I've done in other districts. Similar to internet, social media, knowing that everyone doesn't subscribe to a paper, and how do you capture and share what we're doing with all Orange County residents? It's a direct mail. It can be done very inexpensively. And typically I would do 3 a year in previous districts, rural districts. One of them was graduation. So everyone, every resident in the county, in the district received a direct mail, and it was our graduates and where they were going and what they were doing. We also strategically shared one prior to the budget season of where the funds are going, how they're spent, the accomplishments of students. So I'll just put that as an idea. That was a way that we could ensure everyone received it, regardless of, and not to take away with the idea shared. I think you have to put it everywhere. But that was something that's been done and could be done.
That's a great idea. So it sounds like maybe we want to have, maybe next month we can have conversation around communication with the community. Would that kind of summarize where we're going with this?
No pressure on the board and say every board member has to come back with 2 community organizations and feedback on what they want to hear about our schools and what they want. You know what I mean? It's, you know, I'm we could keep pushing stuff out, but we're talking, but we're not sure who's listening or what they want to hear about. And we need to understand what they want to hear about before we push. I think it's just basic marketing 101, right?
Yeah, Bonnie, the only concern I have is targeting organizations versus families. I mean, there's a mix, right? Because, you know, everybody pays the taxes and we all want our district to be as successful as possible. I think we've got to make sure all of them are included somehow, not just the organizations. But I agree, them understanding what we're doing.
Agreed. A mix of, that's what the market, you know, so when I think of marketing, how do you reach them? What are the channels of reaching them, whether it's mass media, whether it's social media, whether it's school, you know, so there's different access points. And then there will ultimately be an overlay of what kind of communication will come from them. I could see Dr. Felder doing a quarterly report to the paper, and that sets the messaging for all of us for the school district for the next quarter. That's what we're focused on. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're doing. And once that message is clear, it can be distributed through all these channels, you know, in a way that people are receptive to receiving. It's just, I'm going to stop.
Okay. All right. Well, we are at the end of our time. So I think any other ideas you have at this point, either say them real quick or you can email them to me.
The only other thing I wanted to bring back up, Ms. Dole, was that we talked about the PTA item, but we don't have anybody that's an owner of that. I'm willing to do that as well, reach out.
Yeah.
I am attending some of them.
Yeah.
maybe
I can-
come back with
I-
something.
I can ask, do you want me to ask Ms. Moore to do that outreach?
Yeah, if she would
Why
like.
don't, I'll ask Ms. Moore if she's willing to do that outreach.
Okay, that would be fair.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you so much for your participation and ideas today, and for all of our staff who attended and helped us out. I think this is important, so I'm glad we're all here doing this. And our next meeting will be in November, on whatever the second Friday of November is. The 13th, it looks like.
Friday the 13th.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll see you all before November 13th, but I will write up my own version of these minutes and send it out for us to have some information feedback with the other board members. So thank you, everybody. I think do I need a move? I don't think I need a move to adjourn, do I?
Yes.
Okay,
Motion to adjourn.
all right. Thank you, Mr. Atherton, and I second that. All right. And I say yes, do you say yes?
Yes.
All right, we are done with our community engagement committee meeting. Have a great weekend, everybody.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.